France, October 1984. After midnight, the small museum in the village of Semur-en-Auxois closed hours ago. But that doesn't stop some determined art collectors. The thieves have done their homework. The museum has no security system. No bars on the windows. Nothing to stop them. And they know something crucial that most of the town's residents take for granted. This unassuming little museum holds 5 masterpieces by 19th century artist Jean Baptiste Camille Carot. They have never been on the market, making their value impossible to measure. A good job warrants a nice tip. One of the robbers takes it in the form of antique coins, snatched as an afterthought. With no witnesses, no bloodshed, and almost no effort, they accomplish their mission, snatching a treasure in art in a matter of minutes. The next morning, hours after the fact, a museum worker makes the horrifying discovery. He notifies the French gendarme, the military police that serve rural areas. Sergeant Jean Dassy takes the frantic call.
The phone call was short. We didn't get a lot of details. We just got there as soon as possible.
The forensic team scours every centimeter of the museum. They look for a dropped tool, a scrap of paper, anything to help them. But the simplicity of the crime makes it that much harder to find clues.
The only trace we found were shoe prints in the courtyard.
François! Viens voir.
The prints suggested at least 2 people made off with the paintings.
The gendarmes call on Inspector Toussaint Pogial from the Judiciary Police in Dijon. The commander in charge of art crimes is perplexed.
Most of the stolen art cases I worked on before had not taken place in museums because they're usually guarded.
But this obscure museum, open only a few months each year, had no guards, no alarm system. No one ever expected a crime like this.
It looked like local criminals couldn't have done it. We thought that a private collector discovered the paintings and may have hired some criminals to steal them.
Investigators conclude the heist took less than 30 minutes. The museum curator distributes pictures of the 5 stolen Corot paintings. Then another clue turns up. a fingerprint on a window. Police try to trace it, but it points nowhere.
The problem was that the print wasn't in our files. It might belong to one of the criminals, or maybe to a museum guest, and we just couldn't tell.
Police faced the same dead end with the shoe print, which lacked detail.
We were really, I'd say, absolutely in a fog about who committed this crime.
Unfortunately, there's a very vast market for stolen artwork out there.
John Imhoff, former head of Interpol in the United States.
Art theft is a huge problem in and of itself, but it can also be attended to other crimes, such as money laundering. If you think about it, something of great value can be hidden in something very small.
The theft leaves museum officials baffled and embarrassed. The stolen Corots grab the attention of art experts from major museums. Though many of the residents of Semur-en-Auxois did not even know about the masterpieces prior to the robbery, the thieves had obviously paid close attention to their arrival here. In the mid-1980s, art theft had risen to an all-time high, thanks to a booming international black market.
After drug trafficking, after gun trafficking, comes art trafficking.
Mireille Ballestrazzi, former head of France's art theft squad.
There were a lot of works of art being stolen in France, and Interpol recommended that we create a specialized division of the police force with a specific mission of finding works of art. These works of art are a part of the inheritance of the human race. The thefts in Semur were like electroshocks for all the museums to equip themselves better for protection.
For most police agencies around the world, art theft takes a back seat to more violent crimes. But Interpol knows that thieves often sell stolen art to fund dangerous criminal and terrorist activities. For Interpol, an art theft of this importance demands fast action.
We needed help from the international community. We sent pictures of the paintings to all the countries that are members of Interpol.
Art changes hands every day. Interpol needs to be sure it goes into the right hands.
For title to transfer for a piece of artwork, you have to know that you have clear title in the first place, and there's no place else to establish that at the international level other than the Interpol Stolen Artworks database. If a piece of artwork has been properly registered in the Interpol database, there will be a sure hit that yes, this is a stolen piece of artwork.
Despite Interpol's worldwide search for the 5 Corots, the paintings are not recovered. The culprits have apparently gone deep underground, and their artful crime in Semur-en-Auxois is about to be eclipsed by one far more audacious. The painting, Impression Soleil Levant, Impression Sunrise. This iconic masterpiece by Claude Monet caused a sensation when it debuted in 1874. This is the painting that gave Impressionism its name. It is literally priceless. For years, Monet had kept the painting at his home in Giverny, France. Now it hangs, along with other national treasures, in the elegant Marmottan Museum, located in Paris's 16th district. Every day, hundreds of French and foreign tourists come to marvel at the historic painting. But on a bright Sunday morning in October 1985, thieves follow them in. And Impression Sunrise makes headlines once again. The thieves make a quick detour from the crowd. Before anyone notices, before the unarmed guard can make a move, the thieves strike, forcing everyone to the ground. Then they slice Impression Sunrise from its frame. October 27th, 1985. A daring daylight heist in France's Marmottan Museum. In just 5 minutes, the thieves make history. And a clean getaway. They make off with 9 masterpieces into the bustling streets of Paris. Art thieves, but no art lovers, the gang escapes with up to $20 million worth of paintings. They hastily slash masterworks, such as Renoir's Bather sitting on a rock, from their frames. But none can rival the loss of Claude Monet's Impression Sunrise. The theft rocks France, a national treasure stolen before their eyes. At the French newspaper Le Monde, investigative reporter Emmanuel Duroux.
The theft of Impression Sunrise by Monet is inconceivable. The loss of one of the most famous paintings of the 19th century and even of all time. So it really shocked the world because nobody thought that picture would be stolen.
What kind of criminals would do this? Who would dare commit an armed robbery in a museum?
Mireille Ballestrazzi, former head of France's art theft squad.
It was like violating something sacred. Nobody expected a robbery of this kind in France.
Investigators scour Marmottan, hoping to find some trace of evidence. But the thieves didn't even leave a fingerprint. Authorities find nothing.
The investigators had no real evidence, except for witness testimony.
But no one got a good look at the masked men. Witnesses describe the thieves as European. And the news only gets worse. Never anticipating such a bold crime, the museum turned off its security system during the day. No alarms, no hard evidence, and seemingly no hope. And for the knifed masterpieces, no insurance.
The Marmottan paintings are absolutely priceless. You can't put a price on something that is considered a national or worldwide artistic treasure.
The director of the museum makes a desperate appeal to the public for help. Art experts know that impression sunrise could be damaged by the humidity. When no respectable leads surface, cops tap the art community's shady underworld.
We had contacts in the art world where there are specialists who hear a lot of things, who see a lot of things, but who don't necessarily tell the police. We used many of these contacts to get secret information.
Police question art dealers known for fencing stolen paintings. But none provides any significant leads. The investigation stalls. The senseless crime baffles everyone.
Really, most of the works of art that are stolen are common objects of medium quality that are easy to resell. And you can't resell Impression Sunrise.
Authorities hope that such a high-profile caper can't stay undercover for long. What they're about to discover is that the key to Impression Sunrise actually lies in the land of the rising sun. In Japan, 13 months after the Marmottan heist and half a world away, a brazen daylight heist goes down. November 25th, 1986. Morning near the fashionable Ginza shopping district of Tokyo. Business as usual outside the Mitsubishi bank building as an armored van arrives to deposit money. Then, out of nowhere, assailants attack the unarmed guards. They steal over 300 million yen, or about $2 million US. And with no one to stop them, the robbers speed away into the busy Tokyo traffic. A huge haul of cash, a clean getaway. It seems like the perfect crime. But Interpol is about to get involved and prove otherwise. Three bold and seemingly unrelated crimes rock two different countries. First, the midnight theft of 5 paintings by Jean Baptiste Camille Carot from a museum in the village of Semur-en-Auxois in France. Then, during gallery hours at the Marmottan Museum in Paris, thieves steal 9 paintings, including a priceless Monet. And now in Tokyo, in broad daylight, robbers steal $2 million in yen from an armored van.
This was a bold robbery being executed right in front of a bank.
Tomofumi Yamamoto covered the story for Japan's Asahi Weekly.
It was the biggest sum of money stolen in Japanese history. Everyone was shocked.
Tokyo, one of the most congested and one of the safest cities in the world. But even here, safety isn't 100%. The $2 million heist sends Japanese police into action. Inspector Yasunori Ogata is the lead detective of the first criminal investigation section of the Japanese police. The Tokyo Metro Police Department hit the scene in minutes to pursue the criminals. Within hours, they'd located the getaway vehicle. In an underground parking garage, they find the abandoned van. And inside the van, they find plenty of evidence, including a pillowcase, a sheet, masks, a large coat of a foreign brand, and a blanket with an address label sewn in. The blanket came from a store that rents bedding to people with unfurnished apartments. Among the 49 people who have recently rented blankets, they find a promising lead.
There were two Frenchmen who rented blankets. The leasing company normally would have checked their passports, but this time they didn't.
Investigators also learn that a foreigner recently exchanged a large sum of money, francs for yen.
50,000 francs. Yes, I need to open a French restaurant. I need to rent an apartment.
Passport?
Yes.
The teller made a copy of his passport, but police determine it's a fake. Their search for clues continues, and just 2 days later, they get another break. Near the Tokyokawa Inari Shrine, in another parking garage, police discover part of the haul the thieves left behind. 15 million yen, about $104,000. All in 1,000 yen bills. Inspector Uhei Tsukamoto, head of the fingerprints group.
The amount of money they stole was about 330 million yen. That's a lot of yen to carry around. I suspected that smaller bills, such as 1,000 yen bills, were getting too heavy to drag around.
Tsukamoto's department begins the laborious task of checking each bill for fingerprints. The department had recently developed new methods to speed up the process of fingerprint detection. They apply a liquid called ninhydrin to the bills, which they place inside a book that they then wrap in plastic. A microwave creates the humidity that develops the prints.
If we don't do this, it usually takes 2 to 3 days for the fingerprints to become visible. With this, it only takes us 1 or 2 minutes to get the fingerprints.
Even so, it takes the team 10 days to pick their way through the 15,000 individual bills, but it's time well spent.
We found 7 fingerprints on the new bills and 150 on the used bills.
Inspector Tsukamoto depends on the recently installed fingerprint database. But a comparison against 7 million prints fails to find a single match. The other evidence suggests that the felons are foreign. He needs a larger database, and he knows where to find one. Police contact Interpol. Interpol's international print database, headquartered in Lyon, France, gathers the fingerprints of felons in all its member countries. the organization comes through. Interpol identifies the suspects. Philippe Jamin, Richard Leroy, Youssef Kimoun, and Tifra Nordine. The four friends from the Aubervilliers area in Paris. All have prior criminal records for auto theft and drug trafficking. Acting on Interpol's info, Japanese police learn that the men have rented an apartment in Tokyo. But now they're missing. Inspector Yasunori Ogata discovers they left Japan on the same day as the Mitsubishi heist.
According to the immigration records, they went to Singapore. Since we knew that the criminals were foreigners, we started an international manhunt.
The Japanese police pursuit of the brazen Mitsubishi bank robbers will take them down an unexpected path. At stake is far more than the recovery of 330 million stolen yen. On the other side of the world, French authorities keep working to crack 2 cases of art theft. Months of searching have turned up no leads on the missing Corot paintings or on the paintings stolen in the Marmottan heist. As the months drag on with no apparent progress, Mireille Ballestrazzi and her colleagues at France's Art Theft Squad fear that the paintings will be destroyed through rough handling. Then, 7 months after the Mitsubishi cash heist, Ballestrazzi gets a glimmer of hope. Information that the Corot paintings are being held for ransom in Japan.
La piste japonaise est venue pour la première fois par
The Japanese connection came up for the first time when a middleman contacted the French embassy. He proposed to negotiate the return of the paintings in exchange for a payment from the French government.
The news that the paintings showed up in Japan doesn't surprise Ballestrazzi. In the 1980s, Japanese high rollers drove up the prices in the world art market. Newly minted millionaires craved lavish pieces that flaunted their wealth. And some didn't ask too many questions about where they came from. But art theft wasn't the only property crime. In October 1987, Tokyo police ramp up a manhunt for Shinichi Fujikuma, wanted for a $200,000 fur heist. Police want Fujikuma for information. They know he served time in the same French prison as Philippe Jamin, the suspected ringleader of the Mitsubishi heist. And they wonder if the 2 men became partners in crime. Police discover that Fujikuma works at a local restaurant, and they issue a warrant for his arrest. Caught off guard and with no place to run, he's taken into custody. Police have no idea they now hold a crucial link to an international crime spree that's baffled authorities for 3 years. Tokyo. Thieves pull off the biggest robbery in the country's history. But around-the-clock work by the Japanese police identify the men responsible. Philippe Jamin, Richard Leroy, Youssef Kimoun, and Tifra Nordine. Just hours after the $2 million caper, the suspects split up and flee the country. Now they could be anywhere. Authorities don't know it yet, but the Mitsubishi job is just the latest part of a bigger scheme that began in France 3 years earlier. September 1987. Japanese police arrest Shinichi Fujikuma, wanted for stealing furs worth over $200,000. Fujikuma has a long criminal record and ties to the Japanese mafia, or Yakuza. He confesses to police, giving up information on the Mitsubishi heist. His tale begins at La Santé prison in France, where he was serving 5 years for smuggling heroin. His gift for languages allowed him to commit crimes all over the world. Fujikuma met Philippe Jamin at La Santé. Interpol determines that Jamin ran a stolen car network with a group of small-time hoods who grew up together in the Aubervilliers area of Paris. Apparently, according to Fujikuma, Jamin had graduated to grander crimes. Jamin called on his old prison buddy to help sell off 5 Corot paintings he stole from the museum at Semur-en-Auxois.
Check it out, it's all good.
Fujikuma notices paint flaking off the masterpieces.
What about these two?
Jamin and his men had rolled them up incorrectly during the theft. But he agrees to fence them for whatever he can get. Fujikuma tells police that the plans to move the art didn't go smoothly. He could only manage to sell 3 of the 5 paintings. He goes back to Jamin and says he can't find buyers for the stolen art. Jamin, however, would not accept failure. He insisted Fujikuma had to make good on the deal, even if it meant paying for the paintings himself.
Just give me a couple days. I'll see what I can do. Right?
Fujikuma tells police that's when he decided to rob the first store. To get the money for Jamin, he sold the stolen furs and gave most of the money to Jamin. The transaction bore some unintended consequences. When Jamin saw how easily Fujikuma pulled off the robbery, he decided to pull off a robbery in Japan himself. He gathered Leroy, Kimun, and Nordine and hit the Mitsubishi bank, grabbing 330 million yen, or $2 million US. Fujikuma swore to police that he acted only as an advisor to the bank heist, not a participant. But police have no reason to believe him. Instead, they get a warrant and search his house, looking for a link to the Mitsubishi heist or the Corot caper. Instead, they find something even better. A catalog from the Marmottan Museum in Paris, where the second art heist took place.
In the catalog were paintings circled in red.
A check with Interpol confirmed suspicions. These were the same paintings stolen from the Marmottan. The evidence ties Fujikuma, Jamin, and the gang to France's second major unsolved art theft. Interpol issues red notices, putting the suspects on their most wanted list. Their names and photos are sent to police in every country that belongs to the organization. They also notify Mireille Ballestrazzi and France's art theft squad.
Okay, merci beaucoup. Au revoir.
The good news keeps coming.
Ils ont retrouvé les 5 Corot.
authorities locate all 5 Corot paintings. According to Japan's good faith law, if a person holds on to stolen property for more than 2 years without its owner claiming it, the owner then becomes the new rightful owner. Poggial and Ballestrazzi head to Japan to try to bring the paintings home. But they need help from Interpol to navigate this delicate situation. Both countries belong to Interpol, but they have conflicting laws.
Thefts of artwork crossing international borders present a unique problem.
John Imhoff, former director of Interpol's U.S. office.
What may be a crime in the victim country may not be a crime in the destination country. Interpol can only enforce crimes by constitution that are a crime in both of the member countries.
French authorities ask Interpol to pave the way for the French to come to Tokyo to negotiate. In turn, the French agree to respect the Japanese laws as they travel east to attempt to recover the paintings. The suspects have ties to the Japanese mafia or Yakuza, so a mob hit isn't out of the question. The Japanese police fear for the safety of their French associates.
We never felt that we were in danger, but our Japanese colleagues thought that we were. So they did everything they could to protect us, and they were always with us.
Brilliantly balancing legality with diplomacy, Ballestrazzi spends the next 3 weeks tirelessly negotiating the return of the paintings.
Madame Ballestrazzi negotiated like an expert, convincing our Japanese colleagues that we needed the paintings back in France.
Ballestrazzi successfully recovers 4 of the 5 paintings. But an art gallery owner simply refuses to return the last one, citing the Japanese good faith law, which made it his legal property now. But Ballestrazzi won't give up. She appeals to his personal honor, assuring him that his surrender of the painting will receive heroic recognition. At a press conference, the gallery owner handed over the painting and a ceremonial property title, allowing him to save face. The Corot paintings returned home to the museum in Semur-en-Auxois. The culprits have escaped justice, and a greater crime remains unsolved. Impression, Sunrise, and the other 8 paintings from Marmottan are still missing. French authorities believe that Philippe Chaman and his accomplices have everything to do with the theft at Marmottan. This gang of hardened criminals make a career out of disappearing. And when they do turn up, it's usually too late. One of the suspects, Richard Leroy, is shot dead outside his Paris apartment. Apparently, a professional hit.
In this case, many people ended up dead. Many of the people we questioned were killed. They died in violent ways, assassinated.
It's up to Interpol to track down the criminals, to save the paintings, and maybe a few lives. Interpol tracks a ruthless gang of thieves implicated in at least 3 major robberies. They've made off with millions of yen from an armored van in Tokyo, 5 paintings from one museum in France, and 9 paintings from the Marmottan Museum, including Monet's masterpiece, Impression, Sunrise. One suspect, Richard Leroy, has been murdered, but 3 remain at large. Paris, France, 1988. 3 years after the Marmottan caper, French authorities make a breakthrough in the investigation. One of the suspects, Tifra Nordine, applies for a new French passport. But in a routine check with the police, authorities find his name in Interpol's red notices. When he tries to pick up the new passport, French police arrest him. Later, an informant tells police that the ringleader, Philippe Jamin, is hiding out in Mexico. Interpol takes it from there, working closely with Mexican police.
When a member country of Interpol learns that a fugitive is residing in that country, they have two challenges.
John Imhoff, former head of Interpol in the United States.
One, is this indeed the person who's wanted by the other country? And two, are the crimes for which this person is wanted something for which we can extradite? Interpol supports that transaction by making sure that information is delivered in a timely fashion.
Agents take the suspect into custody. France and Mexico share no formal extradition agreement, but Interpol helps return Jamin to France. Mireille Ballestrazzi of France's art theft squad has waited a long time for this moment. She hopes Jamin will be the key to finding Impression Sunrise and the other 8 paintings from the Marmottan Museum, missing now for almost 3 years. But Jamin won't talk. Ballestrazzi turns to Interpol again. They help her obtain phone records from Tokyo. She discovers the phone number of a man who had once tried to broker a deal for Impression Sunrise. This man placed a number of calls to someone in the town of Porto Vecchio, in Corsica, an island off the coast of France. The man is Pierre Comiti, a part-time bartender. Ballestrazzi receives a tip he might have his hands on the Marmottan paintings. She travels to Corsica to chase the lead.
Mireille Ballestrazzi, j'ai des questions.
She once again uses her powers of persuasion and tenacity. And Comiti leads her to the paintings stolen from the Marmottan, including Impression Sunrise. After 5 years of tireless effort, she prevails. The paintings leave Corsica and finally return to Paris. But the investigation frustrates authorities, who can't find enough evidence to charge the suspects with stealing the paintings.
We never had real evidence, simply a series of elements of evidence. Some witness testimony that, put together, made us believe they were the perpetrators.
Philippe Jamin and Tifra Nordine stand trial for the Mitsubishi robbery. But their fingerprints on the stolen money are the only evidence of their connection to the crime. So the men get convicted merely for receiving stolen goods. Their sentence is time served. To this day, Youssef Kimon has not been found. But for Mireille Ballestrazzi, what really matters is the return of the missing masterpieces. She would soon join the organization that helped her find the paintings. In 2002, she joins Interpol's executive committee. art theft remains a worldwide problem, fueling terrorism and organized crime. Right now, Interpol's database lists 11,000 stolen paintings worldwide. Many will never be recovered, but Interpol will never stop looking. Cancun, Mexico. Tourists from all over the world travel to the resort city to take in its exotic nightlife. But in April of 1993, that nightlife turns deadly. Rafael Aguilar Guajardo is one of Mexico's most dangerous drug lords, a man with many enemies. While he finishes his dinner with his wife, one of his enemies prepares to settle an old score. Outside, Georgianne Knafelk and her husband Barry Rosenbaum are enjoying a second honeymoon in Cancun. Georgianne is 2 months pregnant, and the American couple wanted to take the trip before the baby was born. Pushes his wife to safety and grabs Georgianne as a shield. The drug lord is dead. But he is not the only victim. Barry and Georgianne's dream vacation ends in a nightmare. By the time paramedics arrive, it is too late. The scene yields scant evidence. The witnesses draw a blank. There is little to help police find the man behind the brutal murder of a drug lord and an American vacationer. Police fear this is only the beginning.
When you have a gangland-style slaying, it's probably not going to be the only hit.
John Emhoff, the former head of the United States Interpol office.
You need to figure out why it occurred. You need to figure out the motivation, first of all, to solve the crime, and second of all, so that you can understand the dynamics of who might be next.
The Mexican police begin their search to find Rafael Guajardo's killer. Guajardo is the kingpin of one of the country's largest and most dangerous drug smuggling organizations, the Juarez Cartel. It is one of 3 cartels that control drug traffic through Mexico. The Tijuana Cartel controls the western part of the country. The Gulf Cartel operates in the east. And the Juarez Cartel holds the center. Guajardo's death makes his entire cartel vulnerable and ignites a desperate power struggle among his lieutenants. U.S. Customs Agent John Hensley.
Now you have a headless organization, and you have a vacuum, and they have been in that business long enough to know what happens when you have a vacuum. They're going to be at war, they're going to be threatened, they're going to be killed.
That very night, the bloody battle for control rages as the streets of Mexico's border towns erupt in violence. 8 Juarez cartel drug lieutenants loyal to Guajardo are hunted down and killed. This bloody power grab is for incredibly high stakes. The Juarez cartel makes billions in profits by delivering Colombian cocaine into the U.S. Juarez is on the northern border of Mexico. It's separated from El Paso, Texas by the Rio Grande River. It's one of the largest border crossings into the U.S. Customs officers and police on both sides of the border struggle to stem the tide of illegal drugs. In Juarez, the police use high-tech surveillance systems to try and gain the advantage. At the crossing into El Paso, U.S. Customs agents are engaged in a constant search. Their target, the billions of dollars in Colombian cocaine the Juarez cartel moves across the border each year. Interpol assists on both sides of the border, but the head of Mexican Interpol, Ponce Edmonson, recognizes it is a losing battle.
No law enforcement in the world has succeeded in the combat. We are in war against the drug dealers. We're trying to control the flow of drugs. The seizures we're doing are less than 20% of the drugs that go through.
Now, a killing has given the cartel a new leader. Mexican police and U.S. Customs must find out who is in control. Informants on the street tell them that the man who ordered the hit on Guajardo is one of his drug lieutenants, Amado Carrillo Fuentes. The Juarez cartel, like many businesses, has two divisions. Rafael Guajardo, a sort of head of sales, made the business deals, and Amado Carrillo Fuentes oversaw the operations. But the two men don't get along. Carillo Fuentes doesn't enjoy sharing power.
Armando Carrillo Fuentes was undereducated, very aggressive guy.
U.S. Customs agent John Hensley has fought the war on drugs for 30 years.
The key to success for a man like Armando Carrillo Fuentes was ruthlessness.
Carillo Fuentes joined the cartel as a teenager, and over the years, police have become familiar with the aftermath of his quick and bloody rise to power. But despite Carillo Fuentes' reputation, authorities can never pin any of the murders on him. Looking for something to link him to the Guajardo hit, police put his mansions under 24-hour surveillance. With Guajardo out of the way, Carillo Fuentes continues to make his money by familiar means. Driving Colombian cocaine into the U.S. from the notorious Medellin cartel. Cartel operatives smuggle most of the drugs in the hollowed dashboards and hidden compartments of specially modified cars. The Colombians pay Carillo Fuentes handsomely, but to increase their own profits, they propose a change in their payment plan.
The Colombians made a decision it would be cheaper if they just paid the Juarez cartel in dope. And so they started paying them in hundreds and hundreds of kilos of cocaine. In terms of actual cash, they saw it as a good deal.
But the Colombians miscalculated badly.
What they did was create and make Armado Carrillo Fuentes a cocaine drug lord.
Now Carillo Fuentes is moving his own cocaine and competing directly with the Colombian Medellin cartel for the same market. The Colombians try to stop him, but Carillo Fuentes takes a bold stand.
They were going to cut off their cocaine supplies unless they stopped competing. And the answer back was, then you're moving no drugs through Mexico. We will shut you down, shut the door, because we control this. We also control the street organizations in the United States, and they're not going to buy from you anymore. They're going to buy from us.
In preparation for this move, Carillo Fuentes reaches out to competing cartels. He no longer needs the Medellin cartel. They know it and give in to Carillo Fuentes' demands. They become his partners. With this victory, Carillo Fuentes takes over cocaine trafficking into most of the United States.
The Juarez cartel were actually doing business from start to finish, from the fields in Colombia, the labs down there, all the way to the streets of Los Angeles, California, and New York City.
But the huge money grab by the cartel creates chaos in the Mexican border towns. And in some cases, corrupt authorities stand by and watch it happen. In fact, the corruption fuels Carillo Fuentes' organization.
The police in Mexico have historically received very low pay and don't come from a professional background and have accepted the fact that they can accept bribes. And so as you accept bribes for a traffic ticket, why not take bribes on a drug transaction?
Carillo Fuentes and his gang make anyone who can help them a simple and terrifying offer. Bullets or pesos. Either they take his money or die. Carillo Fuentes' bribes reach the highest levels of government. Some officials receiving as much as $1.5 million a month. Despite the threats, some officers won't back down. In November of 1994, Police Commander Jose Refugio Rubalcaba leaves his wife Maria and heads to work. Refugio Rubalcaba is a reformer who is cleaning up the police department by firing dozens of corrupt officers. He refuses to bow to the drug lord's threats. But today, he is picked up by members of the cartel. Days later, Jose is found murdered in the trunk of a car. A knife punctured his lungs.
In the law enforcement community, when someone goes down, no matter what their nationality, it affects all of us.
Despite the danger and almost routine corruption, many police refuse to bow to Carillo Fuentes' threats.
There's a lot of risk, there's a lot of threats, but I mean, it's a job and you have to do it. Everybody is afraid in life. If you step back, you're a coward. I go up front. One step more. That's it.
In August of 1993, U.S. Customs and the Mexican police are alerted of a large-scale drug bust. Mexican naval officers routinely searching cargo vessels uncovered 9 tons of cocaine worth over $20 million. It is bound for the United States. According to Interpol agent Ponce Edmonson, this kind of bust makes the cartels vulnerable.
If they lose a load of cocaine, sometimes they won't have the money to pay the provider. They can get the Colombians knocking at their door, say, hey, I want my money. So those things are good for law enforcement.
Word of the bust soon travels to Carillo Fuentes' Colombian partners. They are furious to lose so much product and blame Carillo Fuentes. They assume he has lost control of his organization. Colombian justice takes its usual form. They decide to take him out. On November 24th, 1993, at a restaurant in Mexico City, the Colombians make their move. A move that will have an unintended and terrifying effect. In Mexico, on November 24th, 1993, Mexican police struggle to make sense of a horrifying crime scene. Colombian hitmen have attempted to kill drug kingpin Amado Carrillo Fuentes and his wife. The assassins miss their mark and pay for it with their lives. Carillo Fuentes and his wife escape. Journalist Jorge Mendez covers the drug cartels extensively.
It was a miracle Carillo Fuentes escaped. One of his bodyguards risked his own life and rushed Fuentes and his wife out of the restaurant, pushed him into an armored truck, and saved their lives.
The bodyguard who saves Carillo Fuentes is reportedly Alcides Ramon Mahana, a policeman turned gang member. Short in stature, he is nicknamed El Metro, or the Meter.
He had some power and influence, but because he stayed in the shadows, he was never considered one of the important players in the cartel.
That is all about to change. Carillo Fuentes rewards El Metro for his outsized bravery by making him his right-hand man. He also gives him control of the profitable Cancun territory. All the drug traffic in the popular resort town is now under the control of El Metro. El Metro, known as Carillo Fuentes' enforcer, has a reputation of conducting business with extreme violence. Investigators intensify their efforts to find him. U.S. Customs gets a tip that El Metro may be using retail trucks to smuggle drugs out of the country and bring money in. But finding them is a daunting task. Each year, 16 million vehicles cross into the U.S. from Juarez alone. But the diligence of U.S. Customs and Mexican police starts to pay off. U.S. Customs agent John Hensley.
One case in particular, El Paso, our inspector seized over $10 million hidden in a frozen food truck. That hurt him a lot.
With each success, Customs gathers intelligence and increases the pressure.
We put a hard press on the Mexican drug cartels. We did share intelligence and information with Juan Miguel Ponce and the people from Interpol. They were beginning to focus as to where they could attack the Juarez cartel most effectively.
The intelligence begins to hurt the cartel. Interpol and Mexican narcotics agents confiscate huge amounts of drugs, weapons, and cash.
The Mexicans began doing sweeps and seizing property. That's when the Juarez cartel really started to shake.
As the intense pressure on the border cuts into the cartel's profits, Carillo Fuentes and El Metro shift their tactics. He starts shipping by air. Once again, good intelligence pays off. U.S. Customs learns of the drug lord's new strategy and follows his every move. His drug shipments are easy prey for U.S. Customs spotter planes. When the planes land in the U.S., Customs agents are often there to greet them. Yet the more than $5 billion in seizures authorities make each year barely makes a dent in the trade. U.S. cities are still flooded with drugs from the Juarez cartel.
Amado Carrillo Fuentes became one of the biggest drug organizations that we've ever known about.
Undaunted by the small plane busts, Carillo Fuentes uses another way.
They were buying large planes, which were bought like scrap material. They were very old planes from cargo airlines or regular fleet airlines. Nobody had statistics. And so it was very easy for them to buy. They put $50,000 and just they needed one more flight. And they crashed it at any beach or desert, but there was 10 tons of cocaine or 12 tons of cocaine.
The drug lord catches U.S. Customs off guard.
Was not something we were initially looking for. They flew the same routes, altitudes, and essentially tried to look like a commercial aircraft.
The large aircraft create enormous profits for the cartel. Amado Carrillo Fuentes has become an extremely wealthy and powerful man.
Fuentes had the benefits that eschew from that kind of power. Women, mansions, jet planes, nice clothes, all the trappings of a drug lord.
He owned 54 mansions all over the country of Mexico. But his enormous wealth brings enormous problems. Carillo Fuentes is having trouble hiding the mountains of cash he is earning as profit. This might be the weakness in the organization investigators have been searching for. Carillo Fuentes needs help laundering his money. U.S. Customs and Interpol devise a way to help the drug lord with his problem.
Interpol in Mexico began working with us to identify the assets, to seize them, to identify people to arrest and prosecute.
They set up their own money laundering front and launch a sting called Operation Casablanca. Their only interest is in one client.
The Juarez cartel was always looking for a new source to launder their money. And so we began moving millions and millions of their dollars through the banking system.
Operation Casablanca is a success. The DEA files indictments and begins investigations of Carillo Fuentes' financial activities in the United States. Interpol agent Ponce Edmonson sees the investigation start to hurt the cartel.
If you cut the money laundering, they're ruined because they don't have the engine, the motor that makes the organization.
Investigators begin to tighten the noose. They have enough to arrest the targets of the cartel indictments.
The Mexican government, with Juan Miguel Ponce as the point person, began arresting those people that there were warrants outstanding on in Mexico.
Investigators are finally closing in on Carillo Fuentes.
The heat was too high on Fuentes for him to survive in his present role.
But the heat has an unintended effect.
There were just too many newspaper headlines, too many U.S. indictments. He was definitely going to get out of the way before he got caught.
When investigators finally believe they are getting close to Carillo Fuentes, he disappears. A man with his money can hide anywhere in the world. Only one agency has the means to find him: Interpol. When police begin pressuring Mexican drug lord Amado Carrillo Fuentes, he disappears. U.S. Customs, Mexican police, and Interpol work all their contacts to find him. But surveillance by Mexican police is not working. Rumors indicate the drug lord may even have undergone plastic surgery. Mexican Interpol's Ponce Edmonson knows the reason Carillo Fuentes is on the run.
He was scared as hell that we would detain him. Carillo felt he's always in hiding. He never sleeps 2 nights in the same place. When he has such a large organization tipping him off, when he has corrupt cops giving him information, when he can buy false, forged documents, passports of different nationality, he was so afraid that he took a lot of precautions.
Nothing investigators are doing works. Police at his home have not seen the drug lord since he drove off. Now that he is gone, Mexican police make a bold move. They seize Carillo Fuentes' property in Mexico, some 54 mansions in all. They hope one of these homes will hold a clue to his current hideout. Police come up empty, but head of Mexico's Interpol office, Ponce Edmonson, notices a curious similarity.
They were in different places with different decorations, but they had pool tables. Why they had pool tables? Because Amado Carrillo Fuentes had to be hidden most of his time, and he liked to play pool.
Pool is not popular in Mexico. The drug lord's passion for the game might just lead Ponce to his hideout. Investigators notice several of Carillo Fuentes' most trusted cartel members have also vanished. Ponce Edmonson fears he's fled the country.
Quite easy for a person like him. Or he could offer $500,000 for some passports. So, I mean, corruption is anywhere when it's at those prices.
Carillo Fuentes might be able to buy anonymity, but he can't buy luck. In England, 5,000 miles from Ponce Edmonson's office, a strange break occurs in the case. A woman at afternoon tea at the Ritz Hotel in London has $80,000 in traveler's checks stolen. Outraged, she goes to the police. Scotland Yard offers to investigate. The thief doesn't get far. A few days later, when he has an accomplice try to cash the checks, they find him. But it seems suspicious this woman would be carrying $80,000. To check out her story, the British detective turns to Interpol for help. He contacts Ponce Edmonson at the Mexican Interpol office.
When I heard the name of the lady, I knew was the mother of the principal lieutenant of Amado Carrillo.
Her son, Eduardo Gonzalez Quiarte, has worked with Carillo Fuentes for years. Ponce Edmonson wants to take a closer look at the stolen traveler's checks. Scotland Yard faxes over the information. Interpol agent Ponce Edmonson wastes no time in running down the check numbers.
Those numbers of checks were bought wholesale $2.5 million, and they were in the hands of the Juarez cartel.
Investigators learn they were purchased from a currency exchange office in Mexico City. Interpol finally has a tool they can use to track the cartel members.
I was seeing the breadcrumbs of where they were going, because every check that was traded, I was informed. So they went London, Paris, Barcelona, Moscow, Jerusalem, and most were spent in Chile and Argentina. So I went to Chile and Argentina.
In Argentina, Edmonson notices that a Juan Rangel has been using the checks to buy real estate. Rangel would provide the drug lord with the perfect cover. Ponce Edmonson travels to Argentina to talk with the real estate company where the man known as Rangel cashed several of the checks. The company provides no information. It seems even in South America, Carillo Fuentes is buying people's allegiance. To capture Carillo Fuentes, investigators are going to need a break. Ponce Edmonson plays a hunch.
I said, this is going to be quite difficult if we don't have something. What was that something? Pool tables. I knew that Amado couldn't live without a pool table.
When agents in Mexico seize Carillo Fuentes' mansions, they notice they all have pool tables. Ponce Edmonson believes he may be able to use Carillo Fuentes' unusual hobby to trip him up. He visits an importer who handles pool tables and plays a ruse.
I said, I love to play pool, and I would like to know if those people that bought those pool tables, if it's a bar or something where I could go play pool. No. They were for 4 private homes, and precisely was one of your compatriots, a Mexican that bought. Oh, then it would be love to play. Why don't you give me the address?
Edmondson's plan works. He gets the addresses. Convinced Carillo Fuentes must be behind the purchases, Edmonson closes in. The residences are locked up tight. Carillo Fuentes has vanished. Ponce Edmonson broadens the search to other South American countries. John Emhoff.
Yeah, the Juarez cartel's huge. I mean, they've got more money, they've got more people, they've got more connections than any local law enforcement agency, even in any one country's law enforcement agencies. But when you bring Interpol into the equation, now you have this force multiplier. You can match fire with fire.
The Interpol offices in Mexico City, Buenos Aires, and Santiago, Chile compare their information. The office in Argentina gets a tip Carillo Fuentes is at a hotel in Buenos Aires. Ponce Edmonson finally has him in his sights. But the drug lord has gotten away many times before. Mexican Interpol agents track Juarez drug lord Amado Carrillo Fuentes to a hotel in Argentina. But when they raid the hotel, Carillo Fuentes is long gone.
Somebody tipped him and he left. We always one step behind. But that was good, because that's what got him so nervous and made him commit mistakes.
While staying at the hotel, Carillo Fuentes had made a series of calls to the same town in Argentina. Now Interpol agents believe they have finally found his hideout. But before Interpol's Ponce Edmonson gets to him again, he goes on the run. Pressure from the authorities forces Carillo Fuentes once more to flee the country. Interpol agents learn he escapes from Buenos Aires and goes to Cuba. From there, he sneaks back into Mexico. July 1997. Amado Carrillo Fuentes plans to disappear permanently. In a hospital in Mexico, he undergoes plastic surgery on his face. But something goes horribly wrong during the procedure. Under the effects of anesthesia, Carillo Fuentes stops breathing, and the medical team cannot revive him. Carillo Fuentes dies on the operating table. When Ponce Edmonson learns of the accident, he rushes to the hospital to try and identify the infamous criminal's body. Mexican officials and U.S. narcotics authorities want to confirm that the operating table victim is, in fact, Carillo Fuentes.
The media thought that he was so resourceful and he had so much money that he could have put another corpse, so people will think he was dead, and then he would get out of the pressure. So it was very important to produce enough evidence to show that he was who he was, and that was DNA.
They take tissue and blood samples for testing. This microscopic evidence holds the key to the man's identity. A DNA lab in the U.S. confirms the dead man in the hospital is Amado Carrillo Fuentes. The murderer and drug kingpin who took over the cartel by killing his predecessor, an innocent tourist, and countless others, is dead. At autopsy, authorities discover the kingpin, a cocaine user himself, had the drug in his system when he died. He also had traces of a sedative, Dormicum, which Carillo Fuentes often used to help him sleep after a cocaine binge. When the anesthetic combined with the Dormicum, it created a fatal cocktail. The ruthless drug lord had been struck down by drugs. Interpol has finally found Amado Carrillo Fuentes, but his death only signals the beginning of a new bloody drug war. It will turn the entire country into a battlefield.
It's like a wolf pack. When you knock the lead wolf down, they don't stop running. Somebody else emerges and the wolf pack just keeps on going. Generally, that is the most ruthless of the lieutenants waiting in the wings.
Mexican newspapers print photos of Carillo Fuentes' corpse in the operating room, and news of his demise rocks the Mexican underworld. Outside Mexico City, a woman makes a gruesome discovery. Along a rural road, she finds a barrel. Inside is a mutilated corpse. Police identify the unfortunate man as the doctor who performed the plastic surgery on Carillo Fuentes.
It's the ultimate signal of disrespect to an individual. So they send a signal to others that this is the way we're going to leave you if you cross us.
Police have evidence to suspect that the man behind the retribution killings is Alcides El Metro Mahana.
El Metro saw an opportunity to take over, and when he operated as ruthlessly as he did, the rest backed down, and he was able to take over the organization through force and intimidation. He was trying to rebuild the organization in his own mold, which is a lot cruder, a lot more violent. He operated differently through threat and intimidation. So as he had his own sources of information and identified local Mexican law enforcement investigations at the regional and state and local level, his tactic was to find out what he could and then kill him. A lot of local police officers died at the hands of El Metro.
El Metro has to be brought down. In 1998, Jose Luis Vasconcelos from the Mexican Attorney General's office joins the fight.
All the forces of the state were mobilized and exerted strong pressure over the organization.
Mexican police are now joined by the Mexican Army and U.S. military forces. They begin targeting El Metro aggressively.
To do this job, you must have strong convictions and overcome all your fears. These drug lords must be stopped. We must prevail, and we can if we don't give in to fear.
El Metro has shown himself to be a difficult target. He makes certain he is always well protected.
El Metro operated in two modes. One was to intimidate, terrorize, and kill, and the other was he still had to have sources of intelligence and some cover, especially governmental cover if he could find it.
Reportedly, his bribes go as high as governor of the Mexican state of Quintana Roo, Mario Villanueva.
What Mario Villanueva did was offer protection for the cartel. He ensured drug traffickers could land their airplanes and bring in their boats. He made certain they could move freely throughout the territory of Quintana Roo, and even laundered their money in the hotels of Cancun without fear of being detected.
Police intensify surveillance of his operation, but they believe El Metro is quick to strike back. On June 2nd, 1998, Juan Martinez, the leader of the investigation into El Metro's activities, is met by two police officers. Within minutes, he realizes he is in terrible danger. The men, posing as officers, take him to a secret location where he is reportedly tortured for hours. At the same time, El Metro allegedly sends his men to the investigation leader's office to reportedly steal evidence linking him to Governor Villanueva. The next morning, they leave the investigator in an empty field to die. He is discovered in time, and he's taken to a local hospital. This assault on a police officer infuriates Mexican police. They start an intense crackdown on all aspects of El Metro's operation. The new pressure creates problems for El Metro from within the cartel.
El Metro was being very rough. He was bringing scandal and a lot of law enforcement to that area, precisely what the cartel didn't want.
Mexican authorities offer a reward of more than $400,000 for information that will lead to his arrest. When his friends and enemies turn against him for all of the bad publicity he is generating, he decides to make a break and abandon Cancun. Before he leaves, he undergoes plastic surgery, just as Carillo Fuentes did. But unlike his former boss, he stays away from the drugs before he goes under the knife. The operation is a success. But Interpol and Ponce Edmonson are not about to let the cartel's suspected leader get away clean. Their only problem is that now they don't know what he looks like. As investigators close in on the Juarez cartel, they make a series of high-profile arrests. But the suspected head of the cartel, drug smuggler El Metro Mahana, still remains at large. After undergoing plastic surgery to rebuild his face, he vanishes. In his wake, he leaves a political scandal. U.S. Customs and the Mexican police begin an intense crackdown on corruption within the Mexican government.
Drug traffickers must have complicity with police and government officials. The cartel can only operate with the corruption and protection facilitated by the authorities. Before the drug trafficking could stop, the corruption had to be stopped.
In Mexico City, Jose Vasconcelos oversees a task force working to clean up the corruption. It is a daunting task. The Juarez cartel has friends in very high places. The corruption is rampant throughout the military, the police, and it even reaches to some states' governors' mansions. Using wiretaps, investigators prove Mario Villanueva, governor of the state of Quintana Roo, is on the payroll of the Juarez cartel. The corruption reached Mexico's drug czar General Gutierrez Rebollo. He was accused of betraying high-level informants who paid with their lives. Reportedly, a deputy general for narcotics was paid by the cartel $1.5 million a month. But the suspected leader of the cartel, El Metro, still eludes police. Agents believed El Metro was operating out of Cancun, and perhaps with his new look, that he has returned. Agents descend on the resort city. But they aren't certain what El Metro looks like now. He could be anywhere. Police work every lead they have, trying to gain any information on the whereabouts of the suspected drug lord. But getting good information is difficult. Each time they think they get close, El Metro has moved on. Either their information is no good, or he is tipped off. While police on the street are trying to track him down, agents start to study phone records of some of his known associates. They notice an interesting pattern. They are all making a series of phone calls to a number in a small town in the remote region of Tabasco. The town is called Villahermosa. It is the town where El Metro was born. Mexican police put together a team to go to Tabasco and shadow El Metro's every move. Ponce Edmonson learns that because of El Metro's violent reputation, the cartel lieutenants have forced him out.
That group of lieutenants says, look, you made a lot of scandal, you created a lot of problems for us. We owe you because you saved the life of our leader in the past, so we won't kill you. Just think you're dead. You have enough money, but you have no power, no anything. You can't do any more operations. Just enjoy your money and go 10,000 miles away from here.
In Tabasco, near the town of Villahermosa, the agents pick up El Metro's trail. They wait for the perfect time to spring a trap. They get a break from some unlikely sources.
We don't really know, but we have the suspicion that maybe he tried to do something because there were a lot of anonymous calls saying where he was going to be in Tabasco. Maybe it was a rival cartel.
Perhaps El Metro angered his competition, but Ponce Edmonson and Interpol use this information to find the perfect time to strike. El Metro makes an appointment to make a phone call from a public phone. This is the opportunity Interpol has been waiting for. The officers wait for El Metro to approach the phone. They check to make certain he is alone. When they are convinced it is safe, they move in. On June 12th, 2001, Interpol gets their man. El Metro is arrested and brought back to Mexico City to stand trial for drug trafficking. But a Mexican court releases him, citing a lack of evidence. He is then rearrested in March of 2002 and charged again with drug trafficking. He is awaiting trial at the La Palma Federal Maximum Security Prison outside of Mexico City. Years after the arrest of El Metro, billions of dollars of illegal drugs still cross the Mexican border to the U.S. each year. So, for Interpol and law enforcement agencies in Mexico and the U.S., the battle continues to try and slow this deadly traffic. Egypt's magnificent monuments attract millions of visitors, awed by the mysteries of its ancient civilization. The story of Egypt stretches back thousands of years. Vestiges of her history still stand above and buried below. Priceless treasures. Hundreds of tombs, some known, many still undiscovered, hold antiquities in darkness. But tomb robbers and smugglers ensure that wealthy collectors around the globe get what they want at a price.
I come from a long tradition of smugglers. I'm a Devon man, and they've been smuggling for 1,000 years, and I'm proud to follow on.
Jonathan Tokely Perry, ex-British Army officer, restorer of antiquities, and to many, unabashed scoundrel.
I just regret there aren't more smugglers around. I perhaps should start a school.
Not everyone shares the smuggler's cavalier attitude.
To steal an artifact, you steal civilization. You are stealing history.
Zahi Hawass, General Secretary of the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities.
These monuments do not only belong to Egypt, but belong to the people all over the world. This is the heritage and the culture of everyone.
These monuments may belong to everyone, but Hawass and his colleagues are determined to keep them on Egyptian soil. It is not easy when there is lots to steal, and with rampant corruption, many ways to steal it. An estimated 70% of Egypt's antiquities remain buried. Egyptian law prohibits any newly discovered items from being traded or even possessed by Egyptian citizens. In fact, if an Egyptian finds an artifact on his land, he must hand it over to the government, who can in turn seize the land. But in a country where the average income is less than $2,000 a year, many people turn to the black market to keep their property and to make a little cash. If a builder uncovers ancient artifacts or ruins, they must contact the government, who can then shut down their building site. Many rebury the find and seal it in concrete to protect their building project. But even with the promise of some easy cash, most Egyptians are content to protect their property by quietly hanging on to their finds. That is, until the Gulf War broke out in 1991.
1991 was a splendid year because of the Gulf War. Everybody in Egypt was frightened. They were convinced that Saddam would trundle his T-72s all the way down to Sinai. and that Sudan would blow the high dam and Egypt would be flooded, and everybody wanted hard currency. And that meant that everybody was trying to sell their antiquities.
Tokely Perry and his partner in Egypt, Ali Farag, schemed to take advantage of the panic.
Our big break came with the head Amenhotep III, known as A3. This was brought to us by a building contractor from Asyut, who said that under ordinary circumstances, because of the laws, he would simply have concreted it in. But because this was the Gulf War, he was prepared to sell it.
They quickly settle on a price, a fraction of A3's real worth.
The building contractor wanted $6,000, which would what it was costing him to evacuate his entire family to Morocco for the duration of the war and keep them safe.
A3 is a huge score for Tokely Perry, a piece that can establish him as a major player in the antiquities market.
Be right back, sir.
It is the break he has dreamed of for years. Trained at the best of English schools, Tokely Perry graduated from Cambridge in 1974 with a degree, ironically enough, in moral sciences. But after graduation, in Rome, he fell in love with all things ancient.
I touched them, and you have a frisson, a wonderful feeling coming from ancient things. And once I touched them, I knew I wanted to work with them. And to do that, I trained as a restorer. And then eventually, I became a smuggler.
Now the smuggler has to get his prize out of Egypt.
Got to imagine that I was leaving on the first flight. The country was still under military alert. There were soldiers everywhere.
In his room at the Windsor Hotel in Cairo, the art restorer uses his skills to conceal his crime.
To prepare something for transport, my first task was to coat it in a conservation plastic called B72. This protects it completely.
If he can make the ancient pharaoh's bust look like a replica bought at a bazaar, he'll slip through customs.
On top of the plastic, I simply put on a plaster nose, plaster chin, plaster eye. Then I would gild it with gold leaf, and then on top I could paint the decoration, the lines of the eyes, the stripes of the hair, and so on.
At the airport, a customs officer inspects the piece.
These fellows have a nasty habit of producing car keys and scratching the surface. And I knew that if they scratched the surface over the face and cheeks, where there was just the plastic and the gilding, they'd find stone. And that would have buggered me. That would have been the end. So when he produced his key, I had to persuade him to go down and scratch at the bottom where I put a full space on, specifically for him to scratch.
It works perfectly. And Tokely Perry makes off with a priceless relic of ancient Egypt. One he believes is better preserved by collectors in the West.
Getting A3 through customs was probably the most difficult thing I ever had to do. I have never, ever done anything to harm an antiquity. I have saved things from Egypt that would be concreted in.
This English guy, he's saying something that doesn't make any sense. You cannot steal and say, I'm stealing these monuments because this country do not know the value of it.
The next day, Tokely Perry is back on the ground in England, ready to restore A3. When he dips the bust in a mild acetone bath, the gilding, paint, and plaster dissolve, revealing the treasure beneath.
When I brought out A3, it was clear I had an object that was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. It was way above anything I'd ever had before, and I had no idea how to sell it and no idea what it was worth. And it was clear I needed to contact a dealer in that bracket.
To find that dealer, Tokely Parry looks to New York. Frederick Schultz is considered one of New York's most prestigious art and antiquities dealers. When he hears about A3, he agrees to help sell it. But he and Tokely Parry face a huge obstacle. Egyptian law forbids the sale of antiquities unearthed after 1983. Reputable dealers avoid items that don't come from a recognized collection.
One of the things to do was to create an old collection. That is, to give the idea that these objects had come from a collection that had suddenly come to light.
So Tokely Parry invents the Thomas Alcock collection. Alcock was a relative of Tokely Parry, a civil engineer who worked on several continents in the 1920s.
It's a game that's played. Everybody understands it. And I very much doubt if anybody is ever deceived by old collections in the antiquities world.
Using Victorian-era paper tags, Tokely Parry makes fake collection labels for A3 and several other pieces. He dabs the labels with tea bags, then bakes them to give them the yellowed and brittle appearance of age. Next, the expert restores the pieces using techniques popular in the 1920s, including the use of a certain type of shellac. The rest is up to Frederick Schultz in New York.
If a piece has been published, it becomes easier to sell because it has an academic description, an academic backing.
Schultz meets with a renowned Egyptologist.
Frederick.
If he can get her to publish A3, it will validate the work as a piece from a legitimate collection and make it appear as if it were obtained legally. The woman buys Schultz's story about A3 and the Alcock collection.
One of the things Fred was able to do was to get A3 inserted into the Cleveland exhibition of all the works of Amenhotep III, which was published in a very, very swish catalogue. There was a photograph of A3 in there as the only one of its class in a private collection. So that meant that Fred could refer to the catalogue when he was offering it to a customer. It obviously made life very much easier for him.
After the catalogue's publication, Schultz sells the head of Amenhotep III to a South African dealer. The price, $1.2 million US. Jonathan Tokely Parry makes the biggest score of his career, pulling off what he believes is the perfect crime. But no crime is ever perfect. Smuggler Jonathan Tokely Parry and dealer Frederick Schultz sell a stolen Egyptian artifact known as A3 for over $1 million. It's the smuggler's first big score. Now, with the $1 million sale of A3, he becomes a serious player in the antiquities trading game.
1 minute I was a servant at the tables of the rich, and then suddenly I was the golden goose. I was a much more important person. I was what they call a source. And it was a very charming transition. I must say I enjoyed it.
He has operated under police radar for years by maintaining a small operation and watching every detail. But as the smuggler's business grows, that becomes impossible. He has to bring in conspirators. London, England, May 1994. A man walks into the British Museum and asks for an appraisal of a remarkable find.
It's only very rarely that somebody comes in with a piece which is quite interesting and dramatic.
To museum Egyptologist Geoffrey Spencer, the items brought in are very dramatic indeed. Museum experts recognize the manuscripts as the so-called Demotic papyri, discovered by a colleague 25 years earlier. Items that should be locked and under guard at the Egyptian necropolis of Saqqara.
When they appeared in London, it was fairly evident that they could not possibly be here legally. They had to be brought out of Egypt secretly. We then got in touch with Scotland Yard Arts and Antique Squad, and they were very interested in the case, particularly, of course, as we were still holding the demotic papyri. We still had the stolen goods, and we knew the name and address of the person who brought them in.
At Scotland Yard, Sergeant Richard Ellis, head of the Art and Antiquities Squad, investigates Andrew May, the man who brought in the papyri. May lives in Barnstable, in Devon County. And the Barnstable police are already looking into one of May's neighbors. Weeks earlier, employees of a local bank noticed this man. Mark Perry had been making regular deposits of £500 cash every Monday. Thinking Perry could be a drug trafficker laundering money, the bank employees contacted Devon Cornwall police.
Hello?
Detective Constable Stephen Toms is on the possible drug case.
We conducted some inquiries initially onto him and couldn't work out where the money was coming in. It wasn't large amounts, it was only hundreds of pounds, but it was a regular thing on a Monday morning.
The Devon Cornwall police placed Perry under surveillance. Further checks reveal Perry has been flying back and forth to Egypt on weekends.
Well, that was not a usual route for drug trafficking into the UK, so we were at a bit of a loss really as to what was going on. So where the money was coming from was a mystery.
The mystery unravels with the call about the demotic papyri. Mark Perry's neighbor, Andrew May, rents a workshop to Jonathan Tokely Perry, whom police know only as a restorer of antiquities, who recently reported the theft of a valuable Egyptian statue.
Hello, Steve Tom.
Constable Toms puts the pieces together.
We knew that Andrew owned a large manor house. Mark Perry was living in a cottage opposite, and Jonathan Tokely Perry rented his workshop from Andrew May. And all this is within 100 yards of each other, and we just felt it was too much of a coincidence.
With stolen artifacts, travel to Egypt, and unexplained cash coming together in the quiet English town, police believe they have uncovered a smuggling ring, likely centered around Tokely Perry.
It was not a huge leap to come to the conclusion that Jonathan Tokely Perry was the likely source of the papyrus.
Constable Toms assists the Metropolitan Police in executing searches. The team secures warrants. Sergeant Ellis invites Egyptologist Jeffrey Spencer to join them.
We're not experts in this field. We couldn't tell whether it was a replica or the real thing, but Jeffrey could.
The officers find no incriminating evidence at either May's or Perry's homes. They search Jonathan Tokely Perry's office.
And in the filing cabinet, rummaging through, were all sorts of travel documents to Egypt. And there were also documentation in relation to business transactions, selling Egyptian pieces to America. It was decided that the whole content of the filing cabinet would be seized, and we would investigate each document.
So far, no antiquities. Next, they check the restorer's workshop.
Photographs here.
And the first thing that drew my eye was several plastic boxes full of photographs. These photographs were of a man later identified to me as Tokely Perry and others in Egypt, at the tombs, inside the tombs, chainsaws in hand, desecration of tombs.
My photos were actually irrelevant. all they showed was that I was buying pieces in Egypt and disguising them and smuggling them out.
But investigators see it differently.
This was his own record. I've often likened this to finding bank robbers who photographed themselves going across the street to hit the bank and then coming out with the proceeds.
This is bollocks. I was an amateur doing something very traditional, doing something that my forebears have always been doing. I was old-fashioned. I was the last of the old type.
The photos are only the beginning. Investigators finally hit pay dirt and call in Jeffrey Spencer.
And, well, his eyes nearly popped out of his head. And there were pieces of antiquity lying around, which meant absolutely nothing to us, but meant a lot to Jeffrey.
There was a head of a queen in a grey stone, quite sizable. There were a number of small antiquities.
We found in his workshop moulds which had been made from genuine objects which he was then producing replicas of.
The team confiscates everything as potential evidence. Police then move on to Tockley Parry's current home, 20 miles away in Idisley. Inside, no one is home.
Tell them please to turn off that blasted alarm.
But investigators quickly discover more antiquities. They appear to be genuine and illegal.
Now we found some more crucial pieces as regards evidence. 2 large pieces of stone relief carving from an Egyptian tomb of the Old Kingdom. And they were found in black wooden boxes.
The reliefs are typical of those found on the false doors of tombs. At the exact moment investigators are searching Tockley Parry's home, the suspect is on his way home from the airport. He's just flown in from Egypt. For Jonathan Tockley Parry, his timing couldn't be any worse. On June 28, 1994, as British police search the cottage of antiquities smuggler Jonathan Tockley Parry, their suspect walks right into the room.
On my 65th trip, I got back to my cottage and the door was opened for me by the police. And I thought I'd been burgled.
Tockley Parry remains calm, convinced he is safe from prosecution, as he speaks with Sergeant Richard Ellis.
He had a suitcase with him, and I got him to open the suitcase. And inside it, he had a folder which purported to show that he was engaged with the Egyptian government on conservation work on the tombs, that he was some form of consultant.
Also inside the case is a freshly unearthed artifact.
Now this was a genuine antiquity. It bore a Greek stamp, and it is something which Tockley Parry admitted to me then was an object he had found when he'd been taken to an unknown tomb in Egypt the day before.
Since he often buys goods directly from officials in Egypt, Tockley Parry convinces himself it's perfectly fine to export stolen treasures.
In Egypt, I was breaking the law, but I kept very good company. Egypt is a military regime. The power lies with the generals, and if the generals are all selling me antiquities, one has to ask where the law is.
This international mafia from England, from Egypt, from America, all of them had the freedom to do what they want, had the freedom to steal statues.
Such corruption and the huge number of antiquities has made it difficult for Egypt to stop the smuggling trade.
The Egyptian government hasn't always been effective in protecting the antiquities of the tombs.
Former director of the U.S. Interpol office, John M. Hoff.
That a lot of artifacts have never been properly cataloged. The first people ever to see them were grave robbers. They've moved on to the world market without the knowledge of the Egyptian government. So there is this cache of valuable antiquities that's out there in the world that's never been properly documented.
To stem the tide of ancient stolen artifacts, the Egyptians pass an anti-theft law in 1983. Anyone removing items discovered after 1983 is stealing and can be prosecuted. Yet Tokely Parry is now in England, where there is no law expressly prohibiting ownership of antiquities.
I wasn't guilty. I hadn't broken British law, quite simply.
But British law does prohibit what's called dishonest handling of goods stolen from anywhere.
This man is trying to find an excuse. This is bad. And I think this can prove that this man is a criminal.
Yes, sir. The mass of material that we had discovered in that one day was certainly sufficient to give me grounds to believe that Tokely Parry was involved in a dishonest handling of cultural property. And for that I arrested him.
Tokely Parry remains defiant.
I stoutly maintain that morally I was doing the correct thing.
After being charged, he makes bail and is released. Now authorities turn to the other suspects. They interrogate Mark Parry about the regular cash deposits he has been making. Facing jail time, he turns on the others. He admits that Tokely Parry pays him to make the weekend trips to Egypt and either bring antiquities back himself or ship them back to England. Tokely Parry always buys his plane ticket and pays him £500 per trip. Police know Jonathan Tokely Parry is running a vast smuggling operation. Now they must find out exactly what that operation entails. The photos tell the story.
I made about 50 trips by myself. Our secret storeroom was just bulging, especially after the Gulf War. We had bought so much that I literally could not bring it all back myself.
That's when he began using couriers, expanding the operation in a sprint for profit.
Andrew May and Mark Parry were my couriers. Andrew May was the first one, and Mark Parry was the second one. I should never have trusted anybody because that was what started the undoing. I regret that I didn't just carry on doing what I was doing and doing it apparently successfully. If I hadn't trusted these other people, I wouldn't have got caught up in all the furore.
To break the ring and prove the dishonest handling charges, police need help. At the British Museum, Egyptologist Geoffrey Spencer tries to identify the confiscated items and determine their origin. He starts with the stone reliefs found under the bed and notes they resemble reliefs documented in the tomb of Hetepka. If he can prove they are an exact match, police can make their case against the smugglers. But Spencer runs into difficulty.
When looking at the detail, they didn't quite match exactly, and that was a problem. Tokely Parry must have changed the appearance of those slabs so that we wouldn't be able to do what I was trying to do, trace them back to their source, the tomb of Hetepka.
To confirm the suspected touch-up, museum scientists run a chemical analysis of the pigments used on the hieroglyphics. The results confirm their suspicions.
The hieroglyphs have been changed, and in some cases, Tokely Parry had made a mistake in that he'd used modern pigment, which was not known to the ancient Egyptians.
But police need to prove the seized antiquities recently came from Egypt to make the case that Tokely Parry handled stolen goods and broke British law. To be legal, collectors of Egyptian artifacts discovered before 1983 must register them with the government. Interpol helps monitor these legal collections by coordinating a worldwide database of stolen artwork. But this doesn't help Scotland Yard nail Tokely Perry. No one has reported any stolen items from the tomb of Hetepka. It's possible that no one has noticed the theft yet. But more likely, the smugglers bribed guards and other officials to keep the theft quiet. Looking for evidence of Egyptian contacts, the Art and Antiquities Squad reviews the recovered files and photos. They know Tokely Perry and his two couriers are involved. In the files, they find references to an Egyptian contact known only as Ali. Ellis asks Egyptian authorities for help, including General Aziz Maklad of the Egyptian Antiquities Unit.
It was frustrating, because all we knew was that this ring consisted of 3 British men and 1 Egyptian man called Ali.
Only that one name, Ali. It doesn't give police much to go on in a country of 60 million. But this one man could hold the key to crack open the smuggling ring and nail Jonathan Tokely Perry. With the help of Interpol, police in Egypt and England team up to dismantle an antiquities smuggling ring headed by Jonathan Tokely Perry. Zahi Hawass of the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities.
We are going to capture all of them to prove to the world that Egypt is caring for the first time about the protection of our monuments.
But it's not going to be easy. Their only lead in Egypt is a single name, Ali. But General Aziz Maklad has a plan.
I started contacting my secret sources. The only way we could bust this ring was to use informants. We had to place them between the artifacts and the thieves.
The informants give them a name. They identify Ali as Ali Farag. He comes from a family of suspected smugglers, but has kept clean himself so far. The team feels as if they're getting closer. Scotland Yard Detective Sergeant Richard Ellis flies to Egypt to follow up on the stone reliefs found under Tokely Perry's bed. There, Ellis joins a multinational team of police, and together they travel to the tomb of Hetepka at the massive necropolis of Saqqara. This tomb is one of the most precious in Egypt. While Hetepka wasn't a pharaoh, he oversaw the hairdressers to the pharaohs, an intimate to a royal family thousands of years ago.
It was the first time we had ever seen a tomb for someone from the general public. This was an extremely rare tomb. That's why the thieves would pay the dealers and the smugglers extraordinary amounts of money to steal from this tomb.
There is no evidence of theft, and the doors remain sealed. But once inside, their worst fears are realized. Not only are the reliefs from the false doors gone, nearly everything else is too. The tomb's guards confess they allowed robbers inside in December 1991. The investigators believe this must be how Jonathan Tokely Perry got the stone reliefs they found under his bed. The damage and destruction contradict Tokely Perry's conservationist claims.
If you look at the tomb of Hetepka in Egypt, after it was looted, and you witness the destruction that was caused as a result of Tokely Perry wishing to sell pieces of the false door, you will then see the destruction that people like Tokely Perry cause to the ancient monuments of this world.
And this is the real criminal activity. In order to satisfy the desire for profit and get a few pieces to sell, destroy an entire 5th dynasty tomb, which has been there for thousands of years.
After emptying the tomb, the robbers resealed the doors and disappeared. To solidify the case against the robbers and smugglers, Egyptian antiquities police look for evidence of other thefts. They reopen other tombs in Saqqara and find that the looters have been busy throughout the ancient site. Jonathan Tokely Perry may be out on bail, but he is still running his smuggling operation. He gets word that a stele, a stone burial slab inscribed with a tribute to the god of the underworld, Osiris, is available on the black market. It is a piece Tokely Perry cannot pass up. He contacts American dealer Frederick Schultz. They then promise to wire a series of payments totaling nearly $100,000 to various middlemen. The sellers blindfold the ring's Egyptian contact, Ali Farag, and drive him through the streets of Cairo to the place where they secretly hold the stele. There, Farag makes the deal, finalizes payment, and arranges shipping in a container headed to a storage unit in Switzerland.
We paid $40,000 for that container, of which $3,500 were for the shipping, and the rest, $36,000, went to the antiquities police for a single sheet of paper. That's how smuggling works in Egypt now. It's semi-industrial.
It gives you an idea of the international nature of this market and how easy really it is, if you've got the right sort of connections, to move even large objects, because this is a very big piece of stone.
Scotland Yard is trying to keep Tokely Perry on British soil by taking away his passport. But Tokely Perry is nothing if not resourceful. He quickly hatches a scheme to get it back.
And he made an application based on the death of the mother of a former fiancé who happened to live in Switzerland. And he wished to have his passport so he could travel to Switzerland to support the former fiancé and attend the mother's funeral.
Ellis calls on Interpol for help. Through the international police force, Swiss police check the story and discover no such death took place. Ellis persuades the courts to deny the phony request. But Tokely Perry doesn't stop there. He substitutes a different family name, secures a passport, then heads to Switzerland. When he gets to his Geneva storage unit, Tokely Perry finds a surprise. The Osiris stele he and Frederick Schultz paid for is not there. After a year-long painstaking investigation spanning 3 continents, authorities are ready to strike. The name for their plan, Operation Bulrush.
We were able to piece together a complete ring of people involved in the illicit traffic of this cultural property from Egypt.
In March 1995, they execute simultaneous raids in London and in Cairo. Operation Bulrush nabs 5 British art dealers, a British police officer, more than 24 antiquities inspectors, and several of Tokely Perry's Egyptian accomplices, including his main contact, Ali Farag. Jonathan Tokely Perry has already been arrested and charged. He remains free on bond while he awaits his trial.
I was so happy, and I said, this will encourage me to recover our stolen artifacts, because this cooperation proved that this is the beginning. It was really the beginning, and the beginning that we will start, all of us, to communicate with each other, to cooperate, to protect these monuments.
Tokely Perry's trial begins in early February 1997 in London. But on February 27th, Tokely Perry mysteriously fails to show up in court. He has checked himself into the mental health ward of a Devon hospital. Seeing how the trial has been going, he has his own plans.
My barrister said, They will convict you because they desperately want a scapegoat to close the market. But we can have it acquitted immediately. He said, you'll have to go to prison, but we'll get you out very, very quickly, and the whole thing will be clear. But I wasn't prepared to tolerate that.
That night, the antiquity smuggler chooses a dramatic escape route. Mixing a concoction of powdered hemlock, a common method of suicide in ancient times, he drinks it down.
I'd had the Queen's Commission, I'd served my country, I was very, very proud of what I was doing, and I wasn't prepared to be disgraced.
With that, the daring smuggler lies down to die. While on bail during his trial, notorious smuggler Jonathan Tokely Parry checks himself into a mental ward in Devon, England, drinks hemlock, and awaits his death. Devon Cornwall police track him down.
Mr. Tokely Parry, wake up. Mr. Parry, wake up. Mr. Parry. Mr. Tokely Parry.
Mr. Parry, wake up. You alright?
Sit up, Mr. Parry.
They arrive only minutes after he drinks the poison. He's still alive. Thinking he is merely groggy from sleep and sedatives, they take him in.
I was quietly dying, contentedly in hospital, knowing that I would be dead within an hour and a half. And then the police arrived and said they had to change my bail conditions. So they dragged me down to the police station. And by the time they got me back, I was halfway into coma, and they took me into intensive care. They had no idea what was going on.
Hemlock kills by slowly paralyzing the body's muscles. When the lungs stop, the person suffocates. At this point, Tokely Parry is still conscious.
I counted 52, I went black, and I thought, well, that's that. I didn't know about the thing called the intubator, which is a tube they put down inside the lungs to keep the lungs working. They didn't know what was going on, but they kept me alive with this intubator for 3 hours until the hemlock wore off. And I woke up again. Not a happy boy.
With Tokely Parry brought back from the dead and vowing not to attempt to take his life again, a new trial begins. On June 18th, 1997, Jonathan Tokely Parry is found guilty of secondary dishonest handling and sentenced to 6 years in prison. In Egypt, he is tried in absentia, along with 11 co-defendants. All are found guilty and sentenced to 15 years hard labor, which Tokely Parry will have to serve if he ever returns to Egypt.
I should only have had 18 months, 2 years sentence. But they gave me 6 years to set an example.
Egyptian authorities welcome the example and hope to make it a rule.
This is important. This is a part of our heritage.
But there's a final missing piece of the puzzle. The Osiris stele that Tokely Parry believed was shipped to Switzerland.
This is a piece that came out through the Farag brothers' route into Switzerland. And from there it was sold to a dealer who subsequently sold it into France, and from France it made its way to New York.
New York FBI agents trace the piece along its winding path. Their pursuit pays off when they finally find the stele at the Fifth Avenue apartment of a wealthy collector. He bought it for more than $200,000, but he never checked on its legality. The agents confiscate the stele to take it home to Egypt. In 2002, Frederick Schultz, the smuggling ring's New York arm, is found guilty of smuggling stolen property. A federal judge sentences him to 33 months in prison. Despite the relatively light sentences for Schultz and Tokely Parry, the case has a profound effect on the world's antiquities market. Smuggling antiquities is no longer tolerated, at least in England.
As a result of my trial, the London market took fright and largely transferred to Paris and Switzerland. There is effectively no London market now. London had been the centre of the world, of the antiquities world, for 200 years. It's now gone to Paris and Switzerland.
Now out of prison, Jonathan Tokely Parry maintains that he broke no laws and is merely carrying on a proud tradition of bringing beautiful artifacts out of Egypt for preservation in the West.
100 years ago, I would have been knighted for what I was doing. These days, political correctness is taking a dim view of it. But I'm still doing the right thing. And I wouldn't have done it if I wasn't convinced of that.
I think if Jonathan Tokely Parry is hoping to see his name in the honours list, it'll be a very long wait.
Most of the looted antiquities have been returned to their rightful place.
I will tell you, the first time when I went and I held an artifact that was stolen, and I took it in my hand like this, as if I'm holding a child, my child that was away for a long time. I'm bringing him back home.
Many stolen pieces, including the elusive Osiris stele, are part of a new exhibit at the Cairo Museum. The theme, the return of stolen art.